My name is Tyler Fornes, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Good, the Bad, and the Hungy AEW podcast here on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. We take a broad scope approach to the world of All Elite Wrestling and the entire universe of Tony Khan. We talk about the big matches, the big stars, the promos, the storylines, and we also look at it from a big picture perspective. How are things going to change over the course of the next 10 years with AEW still in the picture? How are companies like WWE going to adapt and adjust to AEW? Are they going to be a similar way like they did with WCW in the late 1990s? Will there be a counterpunch? We talk about all of that and more on The Good, the Bad, and the Hungy every week on the Voice of Wrestling Network.
Shop early, save big, all month long during Black Friday build-up at Lowe's. Right now, get select pre-lit artificial Christmas trees starting at just $59.98. Don't wait to save. Shop these deals today, in-store or online, because Lowe's knows deals. Discount taken at time of purchase while supplies last. Selection varies by location.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. Fast to finger down. Dance tonight together. Here everyone is singing. You can't know what your part. Copy from what the show.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for November 12th, 2024. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You could find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box to sponsor this podcast, and you can set up a one-time or reoccurring donation. No obligation whatsoever, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside your other host, Case Lowe. In Case, are we going to have to start taking Blue Sky seriously?
I'm not there just yet.
I think that you're smart about that.
First of all, I'm not there just yet because the thought of downloading another thing sounds bad. I don't want to do that. There's certainly an argument to be made that there is no such thing as ethical consumption in this world of capitalism that we live in. That is sadly a pro-Twitter argument. Am I afraid of not having that many followers if I navigate over towards Blue Sky? Of course I am. That's the reason I'm holding up on it. But also, look, we've kind of done the Twitter's gonna die thing a few times. It's much like I had this philosophy on crypto. If crypto is sustainable, and this is a real thing that is going to impact the world in a real way, I don't need to be first. I will get on this train when I trust it. And while Blue Sky, certainly, at least with the knowledge I have, less sketchy than crypto was ever, has ever, and will ever be, I'm not rushing to this platform. Give me some real tastemakers and some real influencers. Give me Bill Simmons. Give me Ryan Russillo. You're on there. But let me get some people that can talk ball, and then I will consider maybe getting over there. But right now, zero interest.
Like the lack of ball talkers, I think is a thing. Like I think that, and I've kind of spouted off about this. I think that at least within wrestling, Twitter has been a unique platform that essentially the world has all agreed to be a part of in some manners. I know Lucha Libre still veers more towards Instagram and Facebook, but there still is a big representation of that there that you would not have on any other social network at this time. Like you have to take it back to MySpace to actually like see like the cross-pollination happening to like that level. And I just don't see like the hang-ups that like naturally now happen, at least within the greater like US English speaking world, I would say, about Elon Musk and all of that. Like there's not those hang-ups in other cultures. And because of that, it's going to be like, oh, all of like I don't see Masaaki Mochizuki downloading Blue Sky to post photos of his dog.
Exactly.
And for me, like that is like, I know that there's like a big like college football inflection point happening right now on it. Someone's doing Terry Tuesday, which I'm glad to see. They have a great photo of what I think is the 1976 Real World Tag League of a minute. So we have some of that, but we're just not there yet, I think.
I'm in no hurry. It's not anything I want. It doesn't feel like something that I need. If I have to get around to it, I'll get around to it, but it's not anything that I'm interested in at this point. I would be more excited, and it would take a level of commitment. It would take a level of universal understanding of we would essentially have to have a Noah's Ark type scenario where we would be recruiting people to go with us. I would be curious to see a sustainable message board come back, not the board, not the Voices of Wrestling board, rest in peace. Pro wrestling only is still there. This will be a sad thing to admit, but over the weekend, I was looking for something on Pro Wrestling Only that was hyper specific, and I had to go back in time, and I started reading old threads, and I started reading PWO threads from 2014, and let me tell you, Mike, these people that think they talk ball now, they don't sniff the insane level of discourse. By the way, not a good level of discourse. A lot of people with terrible takes in 2014, but the level of discourse on that site going, but when you go back 10 years on a forum and read some post, it makes you realize that short form consumption has rotted our brains in ways that we can't even comprehend. Because now, look, we were dealing with Hall of Fame level posters here. Dylan Hales in his multiple paragraph post, Rovert on a message board, Joe Lanza on a message board, but good Lord, the posting was something to behold.
Yeah, I feel like the real golden age of posting for wrestling fans, I feel like we've touched on this like off and on through like DGUSA shows, and just whenever we take a look back, we think it's kind of important to also look at what like the wrestling culture was around at that time. And it's great in some aspects because, at least as it relates to Dragon System, the extent of Dragon System has been online the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Like 1997, sure, you will not get a whole lot of like stuff like this, but I mean, essentially, if you know how to look and where to look, you could find stuff dating back to 1999, like the landing of that. And I feel like that there was this age of posting that like 2013, 2014, that is like it must have been like, I was never a PWO poster, but that came on after like the heights of like, I kind of in my mind have like three boards that I kind of congeal around as like the height of wrestling posting at this time.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's about, I would say from like 2001 through 2006. I think that's a fair range. And it is DVR,
mm-hmm.
the board,
mm-hmm.
and then CZW fans.
Yes. And DVR
CZW fans might not have been around, but like it was probably dead and Ari Zandig fans by the time you got into.
Yeah, because I only know just from my levels of indie wrestling obsession in the early 2010s. Like that's my frame of reference there. I was an ROH World Forum guy. Me and Voices of Wrestling's own Robin Reed and Sean Cedar posting on the ROH World message board.
God, y'all were babies then.
I know. I mean, I'm talking literally 12 years ago, me posting on that forum. So DVR and CZW fans predated me.
Chikara fans was a like kind of a small offshoot one, and of course, like the big survivor of that, of course, Galazzo Dan, the account.
Oh, I didn't know that's where it came from. That's good. I was gonna assume that everybody that was on a Chikara fans message board was likely a sex criminal.
No,
but that's good
there
to know
was
that
a
they're
time.
not.
There was a time where there was some wholesome Chikara posting.
I have Chikara thoughts that we can't get into here because I recently stumbled upon a large source of Chikara footage and have been watching some, and I have a lot of thoughts on it. Not for this topic right now.
VoiceGate open or like Unbound. Like
Yeah,
what would
it's a
our
Patreon
version?
show.
Yeah,
You know
what would our version of Flagship Plus be called? You know,
fucking two dorks yapping. I don't know. If people want my Chikara takes, you better go to Red Circle and hit the donate button. You know, I just got our last quarterly check, and I know we've been pumping out some good content. That's all I'm saying. But the board is the only one. I remember this is so dumb to think about, but I remember the first time I subscribed to the Observer, and I was really excited to be on the board because I knew that Alan Forel was posting his list of 4-star matches for 2013 on the board. He had like, the thread of like match of the year tracking, and it was like, okay,
yeah.
I don't know. I had never had a digital conversation with Alan at this point, but somehow I figured out, maybe through Voices of Wrestling, that like Alan is a guy that I should pay attention to. And Alan had this list of matches, and it somehow led me to, again, this is 2013. So Daisuke Sekimoto versus Shinobu was the match at the time that Alan was putting over. And I was like, well, this is just an insane match. This is one of the best things at the time that I had ever seen. I'm clearly going to listen to this Alan guy for the next 12 years of my life and see how that goes. And then I was on the board for a little bit, but then 2014 is when Voices of Wrestling started their first forum. And so a lot of the good board posters went from F4W to Voices of Wrestling and left F4W. And now I've recently posted on the board just for Hall of Fame stuff, but otherwise, you go through the threads, and those are not conversations you want any part of.
Yeah, I mean, there were some parts of that board that at a certain age, even me, I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm good. I'm good. I feel like that, like my family crest would be like, I'm good. Just
yeah.
And it's like a sign. It's a sign of a door, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it says Spears, I'm good, and that pretty much describes it.
You know what's crazy? Forgive me if I've mentioned this on this show before, not the TV show that I'm about to reference, but the specific point of the show. So I've been going through this big Gilmore Girls watch, and we're at the end of the show now. We're on season 7. We've got like 15 episodes left. And it's so crazy to me. Like, that show's not that old. I think it started in 2000. The final season is 2007. That's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that long ago.
It's in the age of Sopranos,
Yes,
like,
exactly. Same timeline.
Yeah.
But the thing that's so wild to me is the main character, Rory. Her whole thing is that she wants to be a journalist, and she's the editor for the Yale Daily News, and they have this insane newsroom where it seems like all of these young adults are doing Woodward and Bernstein impressions, and there's all this pressure to put out the next day's paper, and all of the, it's just like, it's this world of journalism that does not exist anywhere, let alone the college level at all anymore. And I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about the fact that, in Chicago, Pitchfork, the music website, was founded here and was based here for a long time. And even though they moved to New York, we still had Pitchfork Fest here, and now Pitchfork Fest is going away, which is
right. Yeah,
it's actually that story is more related to the crumbling festival industry than it is anything with music journalism. But Pitchfork is a shell of its former self, and so I have this unholy trinity that we're in, where it's like, okay, Gilmore Girls is a show based on a world of journalism that no longer exists, and music criticism as we know it is crumbling. And you and I and everybody listening, we've all litigated these conversations on what happened to wrestling discourse, and it's made me profoundly sad, because the things that I was, I guess, striving for a decade ago are just things that by and large no longer exist. And that's, whatever, there's bigger issues in the world than how we criticize art, but it's crazy how this all went away so quickly.
Oh yeah, and it's something that, even like approaching it from an academic standpoint, and I have to say, with the idea that now I've been out of academia for the better part of a decade plus at this point, and being like trying to like go to school for film criticism and that sort of thing, I like think back to that time and like the conversations, and it's just like it has just like accelerated so quickly. Like maybe the degeneracy or like the sliding down started, with mass democratization, which, hey, I mean, the blog industry and like that was a mass democratization, and then it just keeps on like expanding out to a point where like the ability, like everyone is talking and that's great, but also like the idea of like, okay, tastemakers and criticism in a lot of different ways just does not exist anymore, because you could just pull up someone on like TikTok or a YouTuber like doing like their long form kind of thing there. Like there's no like who would you think would be like the foremost cultural critic we have nowadays? We don't have one. Like we're long ways away from like Pauline Kael at this point. Like
the sad thing is, it's like for me it's still Chuck Klosterman, and that feels super dated and really embarrassing to say out loud.
Right. And I would say that probably like that is like holding on to like the dying edge of like the Onion and like AV Club kind of style, like Nathan Rabin style criticism in that way. But like do you remember like Pitchfork had a movie website for a brief period of time for like me, and like at least with my time and criticism coinciding with like that website, it's like increase like its introduction and like closure within a year. And then like ever since then, it's like I don't even know where you would start with film criticism.
That's crazy because I don't know about that website. The thing I always point to when it comes to abandoned Pitchfork projects is they had a YouTube channel that was actually incredibly ahead of the curve on the things they did. They had a series called Liner Notes, and then like a series called like Classic Albums in 4 Minutes. And all of that stuff now, they were doing this 7-8 years ago, and it's all stuff that would kill now. And it just, they abandoned it years ago and they don't do it. And it's a bummer because it's just
3 or 4 different algorithm changes ago.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Luckily, they didn't do the College Humor thing and pivot to Facebook video and then go out of business within a year. But still,
yeah, and I think like the fact that the two of us kind of have to pull to someone like Chuck Klosterman as like who is the cultural critic now. In a lot of ways, like everything has gone so much to that influencing that like these 3 or 4 minute ideas that I know that they had for Pitchfork, in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like that we've gone like so far out that now everything is like so hyper personalized that maybe there just is not a mass cultural critic, or it's one that I fully admit as someone who's now staring down the barrel at 40, I'm just completely out of touch of at this point. And I'm just happy and kind of in my silo. Maybe we get the Dragongate ball talkers over on Blue Sky one day. Maybe. That's the hope.
I mean, look, you're not alone. I feel like we talked about this on the show like 6 months ago. We were talking about Caitlin Clark and how she was like the last new famous person that there was. Because, I mean, my job, right? And I say this as somebody who talks on terrestrial radio every day, but I always like to remind people, print media never adapted. Print media died. It's dead. Look at your magazines in a grocery store. It's all these weird evergreen magazine covers about celebrities from the 80s. Like print media died, and television is in a worse spot than radio right now. Like radio is an easy thing to punch down on. It's an easy thing to make fun of. Radio is alive, and a shocking number of people still listen. But in terms of there not being one central cultural critic, like my job was to talk to a mass audience every day, and trying to figure out what a mass audience all knows and is aware of is an incredibly difficult task. Case in point, we did a poll recently where we brought up the Costco guys, and half the audience is doing the like boom 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 boom, like we're obsessed with the Costco guys, we love them. Half the audience is going, oh, I can't even comprehend what this idea is, let alone cultural critics, which I feel like is like a level below, your like fad celebrity type. There's no common denominator for anything anymore that isn't Trump, Taylor Swift, Caitlin Clark, or maybe Harry Styles. That feels like it's kind of about it.
Yeah, like, and even if we go towards like more like pop culture, like putting a bow on it, like you look at like for 5 years, everyone was obsessed with AEW ratings when they were, other than like the slide, were very, very stable. And you look onto what's like the rest of the culture, and it was always the same things popping up every time for 5 years. It would be Real Housewives, whatever NBA game was going on. At the height of Scandival, I feel like that was like one of the last cultural moments was Scandival with Vanderpump Rules. At least,
yeah, absolutely.
But you would see that now, but if you like really just like took, I guess, the 250 weeks that we're talking about here, if that people really cared about that, you would probably see like out of the 250 weeks, like the same top 10 eventually at one point. Like, okay, Masked Singer, okay, you got like 10 episodes of that,
The
but it's only during
challenge,
the
the challenge, going to be in there.
Yeah, so it's like, what is like mass culture at this point? Well, I don't know what it is, and I don't know what it's going to be, but I do feel like that if Dragongate's involved, it will probably have a whole bunch of corporate mascots.
God willing, we get more corporate mascots in Dragongate. I'm normally against corporations sticking their beak in anything, but when it comes to Dragongate, one, Dragongate needs money, so go corporations, and two, I love a good mascot, and so I am all for more corporate mascots in Dragongate. Before we talk Dragon Kid, before we talk King of Gate, Mike, I have a programming note on the Dragongate network for everybody.
Please go right ahead.
So some people noticed in the Voices of Wrestling Discord, some people asked us, a few weeks ago, they randomly re-uploaded the May 3rd, 2018 Kyoto KBS Hall show, and then they re-uploaded the Kyoto KBS Hall show from May 4th, 2018. And we got asked why, what's going on here. I still have no idea. I have no idea why they did that. I looked today. I went, oh, maybe on the 4th, they removed the OWE offer match, Yoshima's last match in the company, T-Hawk's second to last match in the company, and then the two kids from OWE. Maybe they kind of did a Kota Ibushi situation and just re-uploaded that show without that match. Wrong. They re-uploaded the show. That match is still there. What they've now done is they've uploaded 2 of the 3 shows from the Hokkaido Triple Shot in 2018, and I would assume that the third is on the way and they just haven't gotten to it yet. So I can't figure out any differences between the shows on the 3rd and the 4th because the network launched in April of 2018. And so unless I'm misremembering things, those shows would have aired live on the Dragongate network. And they look like, it's the single cam Kyoto setup. It's not anything revolutionary. The difference is that Hokkaido Triple Shot was the last year, I believe, if not the 2019 was, but I think 2018 was the last year that those shows weren't live. They did a 3-hour Infinity episode that cut together the best of that Triple Shot weekend. This is no longer the case. The shows they've uploaded just now from, I think it's the 25th and the 26th, and then the 27th is on the way. I might have those dates wrong, but end of May. They are the full uncut shows in their entirety that did not air initially in 2018. Now, all of the King of Gate matches from that weekend initially made the TV, so there's nothing new there. But like the main event of that first show is KZ, YAMATO, and Shun Skywalker against a Vibes trip. Maybe hold on, I gotta now look. I might have that listing. So it's a whatever it is. It's a Shun Skywalker 6-man tag that we haven't seen before. That's the important part of it. So I don't know why they started in 2018. I don't know why they started in May of 2018. I don't know how long this is going to go, what they have sitting there, and what they're waiting to upload. But the 2 most recent uploads on the network of those 2018 Hokkaido shows have footage that has never been seen before. And I think that's worth noting. And if they get their act together, and God willing they will, this means that they might have footage ready to release of Shingo Takagi versus Super Shisa from that same Hokkaido Triple Shot, but in 2016, which is near the top of my list of Dragon Gate Holy Grail matches.
Yeah, I wonder, and I'm just going off the top of my head here, okay, it's about like this, because like I saw the discussion about it, and I tried to think like, okay, what was really like the situations there. I wonder because yeah, you're right, that the single cams were always kind of the thing when they got outside of Tokyo. I remember for a while that they would have up like that, and then they would put up like the full production cut, and the original full the single cams would go away, and you would get whatever the production version was.
Maybe that's
so
it.
I wonder,
maybe these, because I mean, you got to remember, this is at a time where the shows would go up for a week and then they would be gone. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Maybe these are shows that aired live at the time, but I don't have, now granted my notes from 2018 aren't as detailed as anything 2019 and beyond, but I don't have any record of some of this stuff. So you're right. Thank you for saying that, because there's a chance that maybe I'm misremembering here. And that this is even
I'll look through my notes because I have 2018 notes somewhere.
and
I'll go look through my stuff.
It would be even weirder if they aired live at the time and then they're just re-uploading them. I have no idea what they're doing. I guess, like
it's content.
The Kyoto shows and the Sambo Hall shows, the things that weren't explicitly Dragongate Infinity episodes, this was one of my complaints, was that they would be on the network for a week and then they would go away and they would never be uploaded again. Because in 2020, when we had Kento and Kame and Kakuta and Sora Fujikawa, some of their matches, like for, Fujikawa, I mean, he was, around for 2 months, basically. They happened in Sambo Hall and Kyoto, and some of their early matches have gone away. And even if, I might have a source here or there, I would like for them to be on the network, and it always annoyed me that they weren't. So maybe that's what they're doing. They're just plugging in the shows that were once on the network that are now not there. I can't figure this out. I don't know what it is. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know why they're starting in 2018. I guess, okay. Hold on. As I'm talking this out. Okay, so the network launches in April of 2018. Correct. So this is probably what they're doing. They're putting the shows back on the network that aired live and then were pulled down and have since not been seen, basically. I think that's what this is. So I'm sorry that was such a roundabout way of getting there. But as I talk this out, I think that's what's happening. And of course, the next upload will be something so random that this will throw this theory out of whack. But I'm pretty sure that's what's happening.
Yeah, they'll do like a random director's cut from Nagoya Congress Center next.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love a director's cut. I would love King of Gate 2024 to be on the network. That would be a genius idea. I would much rather that than a Hokkaido show from 2018. Because the problem also is that they're re-uploading these, and it's like, oh, cool, I haven't seen this stuff in a while. And then it's like, oh, it's 2018. I really don't want to watch this.
Yeah, 2018, at least until Pac showed back up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And Pac is not there in May of 2018, and it is noticeable.
He is at home.
He is not in Dragongate, and that is a problem.
That is a problem. But yeah, no, I just thinking it through, I wonder if it is like those previous feeds. Like I think that, but I'll go through my notes and see what I have, and we can cross check that. And if other folks have notes from those time periods, we like to kind of figure that out ourselves. Well, this week we kind of have an immediate topic that we kind of are going to spend some good time on from the Korakuen Hall show on the 7th last Thursday. This went around and it took a while, really, until this morning, until we kind of got a full news. Dragon Kid was injured during his King of Gate match against Flamita. Flamita goes for the Flam Fly. Neither of them rotate all the way through. DK lands on his head. They do the immediate 3 count, and then go from there. Of course, we'll touch on the immediate actor effects and how Dragon Gate handles this and how they should be handling this in a moment. But we've been kind of in the dark over the last few days. Of course, he was originally going to be the main eventer of Taiji Ishimori's produce show today. He was pulled from that. It was announced today that Dragon Kid has had a sprain of, and I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. I'll tell you all what it is actually in a second, because it is what you do kind of have to look it up there. He has a sprained Atlantina axonal joint, which is the joint between one C1 and C2 vertebra. No abnormalities, no breaks, nothing like this. And we're just the company has said that he will return to the ring when his pain and inflammation is gone. But a kind of scary full week for us trying to figure out what was going on with Dragon Kid. And Dragon Kid, fortunately, especially given what kind of botch and injury that was, really getting lucky on this one.
It was a scary afternoon. I had people within wrestling reaching out to me to ask questions about Dragon Kid that are not the type of people that I normally hear from in the aftermath of a Dragon Gate Korakuen Hall show, but word spread on this one, and word spread that this was a pretty scary injury, and people wanted to know what was up. And so I reached out. I've heard from somebody from within Dragon Gate that they expect Dragon Kid to be out about 2 months. Now, this was before we got the official diagnosis today. Maybe they knew at the time, maybe they didn't, I don't know. And maybe this information of the official diagnosis negates the 2-month recovery time. The good out of all of this is whether it's 2 months, whether it's 3 months, whether it's 6, all signs point to Dragon Kid wrestling in 2025. And that is the sort of thing that even 12 to 24 hours removed from this event, before I could make contact with anybody in Japan, because obviously that show was at night and people had gone to bed by the time that I got around to investigating this just a little bit, people were really fearing for the worst. And there was kind of a murmur that this could end up being something very, very bad. And from the roster themselves, I was told again about a 2-month recovery time, best case scenario. It's a neck injury, so this could always take longer. Dragon Kid probably won't rush himself back to the ring. But between that tidbit that I got from the roster and then the official diagnosis that came out today, it sounds like we are in a best case scenario for somebody falling on their head the way that they did.
Yeah, and it was pretty clear, at least from like the immediate aftermath, like his movement around. And when I was trying to like ask around, I didn't do as nearly as much as you did. My mind immediately went to like nerve damage and all of that, and the fact that it is just a sprain, and especially in a company that I mean, it's a fact. There is a track record of cervical injuries. That this ending up being like this versus a Yamamura, Kanda, or Yoshino's kind of situation is kind of fortune looking down. Like what I heard was expect 2025. Like January seems like that. It kind of happened at a time where I don't think that plans are rapidly changing around the company, but it does seem like it's like, yeah, no, he's going to give him his time. And especially for something like that, and given that he's 48 and been wrestling now for upwards of almost 27 years, taking it easy after this kind of thing. And especially with the doubleheader of this happening right after news about Naruki Doi being out for a while with a meniscus tear. So not hug, dropping the belts, and the two of them immediately getting hurt.
I thank God they dropped the belts. I mean, we did not need another Final Gate show with a vacant Twin Gate title match on it. That seems to be a reoccurring theme on that show. So yeah, Doi's out with the torn meniscus. Dragon Kid really stole his thunder, because it was kind of a news story that, hey, Doi's going to be off Dragon Gate shows for the foreseeable future. He had to drop off the secret base shows that he was on, and he was on 2 of them coming up. He is still the All Japan Junior champion, right?
Last time I heard, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't announced he's vacating it. I wonder if the Twin Gate change happened because they knew about the meniscus tear, too.
That could be it, but if he wrestled that match with a torn meniscus, then...
I mean, this is a man who has wrestled through bad necks and everything. Like, speaking about neck and cervical injuries,
If he wrestled that match with a torn meniscus, my new power rankings are Kobashi, Hansen, Doi in that order, because Doi was so good in that match that I assumed he got hurt in that match, not that he came in hurt.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just kind of think that just given how everything like immediately afterwards makes me wonder. But
yeah,
no,
no,
you're
absolutely
right.
It's a real bummer for both of them. I mean, they've been wrestling for 25 years now, and this was arguably the best year that Dragon Kid has had. I think the nice thing about Dragon Kid is what 2024 represented was he had the early years where he was winning Observer Move of the Year, the Dragon Rana, and there's this whole hype around him. And then I felt like there's a large period of his career where there's this Dragon Kid backlash that I don't feel is entirely warranted. And then 2014 to 2022, it's like, oh yeah, that's Dragon Kid. We're used to him being around. He's always around. That was a relatively healthy time for him, all things considered. And I think his legacy and his in-ring work all kind of matched up this year and hit this very, very nice point where the respect level of Dragon Kid is far higher than it was in November of 2022, let's say. And he had this amazing in-ring year to back it up. And, for Doi, outside of being my wrestler of the year and the wonky year that was 2020, between what he did in Dragon Gate and what he did in All Japan, you can't ask for anything more from this guy. It completely reshaped the way that I will view Doi historically. It helped me contextualize his career as an all-time great, and it's a bummer that for both of these guys, they are ending the year on the shelf.
Right, and I wonder with, like, Dragon Kid and a lot of it, like, he is someone that it's not like he was consistently healthy during that time period you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Like, he was someone, but it was always knee or ankle related, which everyone was like, yeah, no, it's Dragon Kid. He does high fly, like all the rawness. Like, no, yeah, he's in his 40s. He's been doing this for 20 years. For sure, his knee and ankles aren't too great there. And it kind of, you had this period, though, that, and I would say that in a lot of ways, 2022 feels like the turning point, even though he gets locked in with like high end and all of that stuff. But just like perception has changed like so drastically, like to the extent that, I mean, I know I'm the big person about this, but I would not think 3 years ago to go like, all right, Dave, I'm sending you an email. We need to put Dragon Kid on the ballot. He at least deserves, like, here's a reasoning why he deserves at least consideration for a ballot. We were not talking about that 2 years ago with him. Like, that is now something that I feel very strongly about, like, probably more so than anyone else in the Dragon system at this point, and representation in that regard.
Yeah, and I not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think that's a lot of your work and your vocal support of Dragon Kid, which I think is entirely accurate. And I also feel like, just as somebody that, kind of going back to discourse that we talked about at the top of the show, that there are different generations of Dragon Gate fans, right? Like, we've seen people,
absolutely, yeah.
We've seen people come in, make a lot of noise, and then disappear. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, some of them need to go, but there's nothing wrong with that. I do feel like there's some really great newish Twitter follows that I say that are all on board with this idea of Dragon Kid is an all-time great. He is historically incredibly significant towards not only the Dragon system, but the people that take from the Dragon system. And it's just, I think Dragon Kid and Doi are now getting the legacy that they deserved. And it's very nice to say.
Yeah. And I think that given everything, like, there's been no indication that either of them are going to be out. I mean, meniscus tear, that is kind of the light one out of the knee, it seems like. So who's to say that maybe they out of the blue get announced for Rey de Parejas in February?
Yeah, and who knows if Rey de Parejas will be in February.
That is true. But we do need to talk about, like, Dragon Kid seems like he's okay. Thank God, all of this. A big topic about Dragon Gate when these kind of things happens is their handling of this. And it's really kind of frustrating that after, in a company that has had a couple scares, that they were pointed out that they had these issues. And even with like the realities of the wrestling economy, especially how the scene is right now in Japan, the way that Dragon Gate handled a neck injury at this point is ridiculous. Like, have a backboard. You have someone who is an accredited and licensed nurse. Yes, kayfabe and all of that. Or at the very least, for like shows like this, there's got to be someone who everyone in the industry uses to be at the buildings at Korakuen Hall. It's just unacceptable in 2024 to have that kind of reaction to someone's injury in that regard.
I agree. It's a very bad look, and that's without a company that has a history of serious neck injuries on their shows, which of course Dragon Gate does. I'm shocked that Korakuen doesn't just have somebody on call in the building at all times. Yeah, I was kind of I didn't really think much of it until the conversation started, and then I realized just how screwed up all of this was. And again, that was sort of me sitting there going like, well, man, I would think Korakuen would have somebody. They have a show there every goddamn day. You would think they would just have somebody on staff ready to strike at a moment's notice. But no, it was a bad look out of Dragon Gate. That's all it was. It was a bad look. And for this to happen in Korakuen in particular, Korakuen, Osaka No. 2, Kobe Samba Hall, because they run there so much to all their big shows. I mean, this is inexcusable. I think it's inexcusable if they're in Dragon Daya's hometown of 78 people. But, I mean, Korakuen Hall, guys, get your act together.
Yeah, because, like, and this is just a complete aside, you're putting not just, like, of course, the wrestlers at risk and their long-term health, but you're not the only ones having, like, the egg on their face, because you're asking your commentators to cover for this. And I'm not saying that Jay was, like, asked to cover for this, but he was put in a position that no one should be put into, like having, like, oh my God, an icon hurt his neck so badly, especially someone like, I mean, Hayabusa was one of Dragon Kid's best friends.
That's right.
And like, just like overall, like the optics of it in a lot of different angles is just incredibly frustrating. Like, if you have like a much better protocol, you're not putting people in a position where they have to fill air when KZ and Kakatora are basically potato sacking an injured Dragon Kid to the back. Like it puts everyone in an awful situation when you don't have protocols like this.
And the reference you made to a licensed medical professional earlier is ISHIN. ISHIN has a trained background. I do you remember exactly what his term or title would be?
He's a licensed nurse. I thought that he was a trauma nurse too, which, I mean, different things of what a trauma nurse means in Japan versus what a trauma nurse means in America, what a trauma nurse means in the UK.
Unfortunately, correct.
He is someone who is a licensed medical professional, and to my knowledge, his licensure is still active.
And I made the point to you when we were talking about it over the weekend. It sounded like I was joking, but I wasn't. Where I was like, well, that would require ISHIN to break kayfabe, and I genuinely don't think, unless it was an obvious Hayabusa level injury, that Dragongate would allow that they would allow ISHIN to go to the ring and perform medical care on somebody. But that in and of itself is an absurd conversation. You need to have somebody on your roster that isn't a wrestler that can take care of this. It is as simple as that. It's just, like I said, it's just bad luck. And luckily Dragon Kid is going to be okay. And luckily the tone of this podcast doesn't have to be 90 minutes of slapping them on the wrist, because it's a really unfortunate situation. And luckily we are living in a scenario where Dragon Kid seems to have gotten sort of the best case scenario out of this.
Yeah, and we will, of course, report back if we hear anything new. With the way that the company operates, I think other than saying like, hey, he like a general report that he's doing well is the most you'll expect until they announce either a return date or until he like just shows up. I mean, that's
it was very hard to get 2 months out of somebody, but we'll see what happens. I'll keep on prying as time goes on. And again, it's a neck injury, so I buy 2 months as much as I buy 8 months. I didn't expect Yuki Yoshioka to be out 12 months with an eye injury, so we'll have to see. But again, all signs with actual information point to this being okay, and Dragon Kid being okay, and Dragon Kid wrestling again. And hopefully this segment ages very well, and we don't have to have a really sad conversation 6 months from now.
Yeah, and I think that it's worth noting that on this show, like it's a testament to the wrestlers and the fans being into it. This happened on match 4 of a very stacked Korakuen Hall King of Gate opener, and the remaining matches on the show the crowd was up for, and was some of the best work of the night. So I think that's kind of like, if you're trying to look at positives in the situation, it didn't completely in the way that like Final Gate, you were left with that around Shun Skywalker and Benkei, and it just kind of took you out of the remainder of it, and it just kind of left you there. And that was the note you were left with. That was not the case from Thursday. King of Gate Kickoff, it's always one of the strongest shows of Dragon Gate's year, the King of Gate Kickoff in Korakuen Hall. And after their stretch of having the best periodic wrestling in all of the world this fall, we get to nicely slide into King of Gate and another strong King of Gate Kickoff show.
It's one of the safest bets in wrestling. The thing you can count on most is that in a big spot, Will Ospreay is going to have a great match, not MJF withstanding, but anybody else Ospreay is going to kill it against. Very high on that list, very shortly after Ospreay is going to kill it is the Korakuen Hall King of Gate Kickoff show is going to be awesome. And this show was awesome. And it continued this streak that I feel like we've been on post-Kobe World, where things have just felt right. And in Korakuen specifically, this company has felt like they are humming along. And we're now in this amazing spot where, the December Korakuen show, the first one is going to be really, really big. And the second one is going to be the Ishikawa retirement show. And they've got
almost sold out.
Almost sold out. It's going to be it. I mean, I would assume it'll be the highest attended Korakuen Hall show of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be the highest show not starring a member of the Exile Tribe. Yeah.
Is that the DDT guy?
Yeah, that's the DDT guy, Takechi. Yeah.
And I mean, what did they do? Like a shoot 1,800 for that?
Oh yeah, no, it's the biggest number since 2019. Yeah.
I would assume, maybe I'll look like an idiot. I would assume Dragongate will do 1,850 for Ichikawa Tanahashi. Maybe I'm wrong, but I
Yeah,
mean,
let me see what
God,
his.
I certainly want to go to the show.
Yeah, I mean, Christ, I would love to get there immediately, right here, right now. Yeah. So his debut got 1,600. So that is now the working full capacity of Korakuen.
Yeah, I can't think of a G1 show that beat it. I can't think of a Super Junior show that beat it. I don't remember a retirement show happening this year. Maybe I'm forgetting something obvious, but I don't think I am. 1,600, that the DDT kit is the show that I'm thinking of, and I would think Ichikawa would beat that, assuming they're allowed to sell 1,800 tickets.
Yeah, I saw his second appearance at the end of September, 1650. He's going to be the just mark him in for the Tokyo Sports Rookie of the Year and all that right now.
And he should be, because he's kind of really good.
Yeah, no, he's a supernova. Like, in all sense of purposes, and it's like, yeah, no, someone who has been a trained dancer for I don't know how long. Kaisei Takechi has been a member of that group, but I mean, he's been a member of these kind of groups like for his entire life, doing these kinds of like artistry. Yeah, no. Everyone's saying like, oh, it should be gymnasts that go into pro wrestling. No, let's get former hip hop dancers.
That is a very good point. I would like to see that. So, even if Dragongate did 14 something for the show, but it just feels like they are at home when they are in Korakuen Hall. And this was one of my big complaints. Even in 2021, which is a year of the company that I particularly really enjoy, a really strong year for Dragongate and the pandemic, their Korakuen Hall shows did not feel like this. And part of that was, if you remember, they had to move their King of Gate show that was supposed to be in Korakuen. They had to move it back into the no fans Kobe Lapis Hall. And that was a show that had really great matches on it in front of nobody. I was just looking back at my spreadsheet, and I had a 4.5-star match on that show. But Korakuen didn't feel like Korakuen that year. And when you think about Dragongate and you think about Korakuen Hall, 2024 has that feeling. 2024 has that vibe that there's now this confidence in me as a consumer that once a month, twice a month in December, January, and June, I'm going to get really good shows in this building. And this King of Gate show was right on the money with what they've been doing.
Yeah, no, it's been it's been such a nice little sub tour, because we know we'll get back to Z Brats and Gold Class and all of that. We'll see whoever comes out of this tournament will end up probably being the Final Gate challenger, and with that, but we're in this really fun period, and we had 3 really great King of Gate matches. I think we should just talk about King of Gate, then we can talk about the rest of the card. Okay, so that works for you.
Let's start with the main event. Let's work our way on down. Dragon Dia, Mike, he did it again.
He is. I was so close to it, and I have this in my note here. So Dragon Dia. Yeah, so close to it. So Dragon Dia defeats YAMATO in the main event with the rebound Reptilian Rana. It would have been 4 stars for me if the Reptilian Rana was clean.
Yeah, that's true. We came off of the Gate of Destiny show where I thought he did the double cork and the Reptilian Rana about as well as he's ever done them. And then this YAMATO one wasn't as clean as that. And you're right, a more punchy finish, a more emphatic finish. And you know me, I'm a sucker for a good finish. Probably would have gone 4 stars there. But Dragon Dia, the king of the very good match, the king of the 3 3/4 star singles match.
Yeah, and you get to have YAMATO getting back to mean YAMATO with this. The one thing I would say about this is if you would have sat me down Wednesday and be like, Mike, go through how you imagine this YAMATO versus Dragon Dia match to take place, that kind of was what we were getting up until the closing stretch, where we got a Bible turned into a Galleria kickout, and then YAMATO was so frustrated for that he was going for the Ragnarok, and instead Dia gets out of that, and that's where you have the Reptilian Rana. And as much as I can say Dragon Dia is a very good B+ wrestler with it, this match was exactly what I kind of expected. And you get this aspect now looking ahead to the remainder of the tournament, and YAMATO is going to get himself out of a hole here, and Dragon Dia very quickly is one of the leaders in this block.
I really liked the anecdote that Jay had in this match, and it's why Jay is so good, and it's why Jay is so vital and why I watch the English feed over the Japanese feed, even though, outside of promo translations, I could certainly follow what was going on with the Japanese feed, but when I have the option, I always go with Jay, is Yamato's chopping Daya really hard at the start of this match, and Jay brings up that Daya in the dojo was a guy that got trained by Dragon Kid, and Dragon Kid was very hands-on with his development. Most guys have to go through Kagatora and then, the litany of other trainers that they have there. Daya did not have to do that, and thus Daya was not used to taking really hard chops because Kagatora has some of the meanest chops in all of wrestling. And just that anecdote there of Jay being like, well, there's a reason Yamato's chopping him. It's because he's not used to being chopped that hard. He didn't have the same experience that most of our young boys have. That, to me, was such a fascinating way to go about this match. It's such an interesting way to break all of this down, and I really, really enjoyed it. Very, very good stuff from Jay there, and it was mean Yamato, like you said, and I'm always going to enjoy that.
Yeah, something that I think a little bit has been encouraged by him in New Japan this year. We are seeing, like, now, at least over this year, probably with the exception of like their double dragon team that they tried in the first Rey de Parejas, we're seeing like the most like overt, like, okay, he is the disciple of Dragon Kid and all of that, which is something that you go back 5 years ago, Case, and that was one of my big like harping points about him. So the fact that Yamato kind of like brings that all for full circle really adds a lot to a match like that. And it's really kind of fascinating how we've reached this point with Daya where now he's inherited that mascot kind of role. And it's just like, all right, no, I'm never disappointed by him. But because I'm like, okay, this is what's going to happen. And then everyone is happy because Dragon Daya is a very popular wrestler at this point. He's been able to maintain that since the mask loss, and how this year has kind of gone for him. It's been very interesting and kind of cool to see, and especially how it kind of relates back to the Dragon lineage, at least for someone who cares a lot about that kind of stuff.
So this is an interesting question. I'm glad you brought this up. I still feel, and I guess I'll throw this to you first. I still feel Dragon Daya was more important to Dragon Gate in the day-to-day operation sense in the first half of 2022 when it was him and Yoshioka and D-Courage, and it was only those two guys in D-Courage. That, to me, still feels like the time that Dragon Daya was most important to Dragon Gate.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because it's changed. Like, it was like a day-to-day care to now being like an emissary to the rest of the wrestling world. And you're kind of evaluating like what matters more in that sort of way, right? And it's a role that I did not see him necessarily inhabiting, especially in the day and age that we have a Big Six, and he is not a member of the Big Six, but he is the kind of Dragon Gate to the rest of the wrestling world right now.
Yeah, this is what I'm trying to figure out is what is his ceiling now? Because it's very clear that Dragon Gate is running with him. They clearly see something or have some sort of intel or have heard some response that says Dragon Daya is somebody we need to get behind. And it's a weird thing where, like, I'm not rejecting the push. I'm fine with it. I'm not necessarily excited. I'm not necessarily turned off. And that leads to the question of what is his ceiling? Are we going to get Yamato versus Daya in Korakuen for the Dreamgate belt? They've got two shows in January. They're going to have to fill one of those with something. Is that the match they do? It all feels so weird where this Daya push, when you think about it, he wins the Brave Gate belt at World. He beats Junta. He beats Tanaka. And then he beats Yamato, and also he's doing all this New Japan stuff, not only the Super Juniors tournament, but he is the replacement for Dragon Kid on the Ishimori show. They're giving him a real push. They're giving him real things to do, but it doesn't feel like he's more over than he was in 2022. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a big push that they're doing in a cloak of darkness, if that makes sense. I'm unfazed by their actions, even if I recognize their actions are big ones.
Right, and it's one of the ones where you kind of, and I know that we had the discussion on Dragon Kid, is he really like going like punch to punch, like that kind of role where Dragon Kid, he's had a lot of Dreamgate challenges, never won it. I mean, like their favorite thing to do with him was have him lose at Dead or Alive for the belt, but one has to wonder now, like at this point, especially when you kind of compare where things are, and maybe this is something that you could that they are capitalizing on the momentum from all the New Japan appearances. That's like, no, we can now have him get pushed to a certain level while we actually have X or Y when King of Gate. And are we now in a scenario where Dragon Dia actually has like real King of Gate aspirations? I don't know, but I do feel like that they are going to try to get him to that second Korakuen Hall show in the knockout format one way or another by just how they've been booking him so far.
I was going to say, I mean, it feels like Dia's going to lose in the semifinals of this tournament, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's where he ends. But it's very clear that was not where Dragon Dia was in King of Gates past.
No,
like, this
no.
Is a
I mean, even in 2022, he wasn't at that spot.
So it's fascinating because, like, I would say, like, looking at people on the show and crowd response, he was still behind Hyo in that regard. Yamato would have his calls. Mochizuki was the most over person on the show, but we'll get into why he was so super over in a bit. The Mochizuki family, rather. But it's interesting because you have someone that I think before this year we would say that he's probably the Twin Gate partner role for Yuki Yoshioka was kind of where we kind of had him slotted at. And if we talking about like how this year has changed perceptions of people, Dragon Dia is someone that I think there's been a huge reassessment on where his position is in the promotional hierarchy at this point. Case in point, Dia beating the Dreamgate champion Yamato to kick off King of Gate when Yamato looked like the tournament favorite going into Korakuen.
I mean, think about what Dia's done with, his proverbial arrow compared to Kakuta. And I say that as somebody that really loved the Dangerous Gate match with Yamato, and I thought Kakuta stepped up to the plate. But, Kakuta was a top 10 wrestler in the world for me last year. And this year, he's not making my top 75. Now, I wouldn't have Dia in my top 50. He'd probably be in my top 75, but not my top 50. Tanaka, to me, is still the star of D-Courage. But what Dia's done for his image is really interesting when you frame it at Kakuta, where Kakuta was the guy that came in 2 years ago and kind of stole some of Dia's thunder and stole a little bit of Yoshioka's thunder. And then if you remember in 2023, they were teaming Kakuta and Yoshioka together, and Yoshioka was the one losing. He was taking all the falls, Kakuta was getting all the wins, and it shifted again in the D-Courage sort of pyramid, and Kakuta was on top, and then he had his Dreamgate run, and then he gets shifted down. Dia, at that point, felt pretty stale. Yoshioka gets hurt, so by default, just by being interesting, Tanaka sort of found himself at the top of that pyramid, and I think he's been there all this year, but Dia sort of leapfrogged Kakuta again. It is really interesting to think about the ways that D-Courage has changed over the last 2 years, even if the theme and the basic principles of that unit have stayed the same all throughout.
Yeah, and you look at people and where they are in King of Gate. Kakuta has already lost the match against Masaaki Mochizuki. So you could even like contrast that in where they are in block play. And then, they're very clearly pushing Masaaki Mochizuki in this, at least in the round robin format. But Dia feels like the character in the other block happening. And in Kakuta, last year I probably would have had him somewhere between 6 and 10 as a wrestler of the year, but now not even sniffing like my short list.
And the only thing he's done is that Yamato match, and I thought he was great there.
Right.
But find me another match where you went, holy shit, Madoka Kakuta. It hasn't really happened this year.
No, it has not felt like that for him. But the match that did have me go, holy shit, Masaaki Mochizuki, was the semi-main event, Shun Skywalker versus Masaaki Mochizuki. Mochizuki wins in a definite upset, getting a bridging dragon suplex to pin Shun Skywalker, and what has been one of the more fun ongoing series of matches in the promotion has its next great chapter. I was 4 flat on it.
I was 4 flat as well. Let's do Mochi, and then let's do Shun. Let's break these guys down individually. There are few things more satisfying in wrestling than Masaaki Mochizuki going up against a definite heel who can also work. Because there's a difference between Masaaki Mochizuki going up against Cyber Kong, right? And then somebody like Shun Skywalker, who is unquestionably a heel performer, but also somebody who is at the top of their game. Mochizuki as, almost like this Rodney Dangerfield-esque character in this match, just a guy who gets no respect, a guy who is getting slapped in the head by a guy half his age. I mean, this is right where you want Mochizuki, and even at his age, I thought he put forth a brilliant effort in this one.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really makes Masaaki Mochizuki special when you look at his contemporaries, and not even necessarily saying he physically has held up, where I think that he is probably looking in the late 50s wrestlers in Japan. He is towards the top of the list if you want to talk about physicality. It's his brain that I think has always been Masaaki Mochizuki's strongest attribute. He is one of the most brilliant wrestlers of his generation, just from the way that he kind of puts forth his matches. And yes, we'll get into this being a Shun Skywalker match in a second, but who other than Masaaki Mochizuki would be like, all right, we're basing a lot of this match around Shun Skywalker doing his knee salt in my stomach and trying to go for this knee salt and ways that you're setting up for it. And I'm going to try to do my own moonsault, and it's going to be awful, but we're going to have this awesome sequence that's building all up to this Senkaku Gary coming off the top rope into a knee salt, and it will be amazing. And he's the only person who thinks about wrestling in that regard.
Completely. We talk about it all the time. You think about, the KZ match in 2018 in this very building where they worked a match around the stomach. And then you think about what Mochizuki did both as a tag team and then their singles match with Mochizuki Jr. And it just has this distinct flavor. No one wrestles a big, important match like him. And you're right, I think you could run this match back. I'm going to use a terrible example, but the personas here are important. Chris Jericho and Hook, right? They could have the same concept of this match going in. Aging veteran, young cocky guy. The beats will be similar, but there's nothing that either of those guys can do that is going to match the brilliance and the sheer joy of watching Mochizuki hit that standing moonsault. That wasn't just a fun, hey, look at this old guy trying something thing. That was something that really mattered in this match. A really crucial move hit at a crucial time that made sense for the critical story that they were telling. And I just don't trust anyone. I don't trust anyone else in wrestling to be able to intricately put together a match around a standing moonsault the way that Masaaki Mochizuki did. And that is something that even his son, who I think is a prodigy, I don't think he's inheriting that. I think when Mochizuki goes, that brain goes, and there is no duplicate, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like you talked about the Rodney Dangerfield can't get any respect. Like, after what happened earlier on in the show, what was the right thing to do? Have Mochizuki win and then lead the crowd in his song. Mm-hmm. And like how much of a moment it was like getting the crowd like amped up after intermission. This was like the post-intermission match. Doing it that kind of way, that's a certain kind of brain about pro wrestling. Like, and someone knowing who he is and knowing where he is and knowing like he always treats Korakuen Hall as a homecoming match for him. He has 14 of them a year, but he knows like, hey, if I need to like amp up the crowd, like after I win the match, I'm going to lead them in my chant. I'm going to do this. Yeah, Kento Miyahara kind of has like his own like histrionics and like all of that really like goes to crowd connection. But that's forced. This is just someone like knowing the moment, knowing his audience and going like, yeah, I did that. And let's get ramped. Let's go. Masaaki Mochizuki is the runaway leader in the B block at 5 points right now, Case.
I would love to know if Mochizuki thinks wrestling is hard. Like, I would really love to sit down with him and be like, okay, this Shun Skywalker match, like, did you have to really sit and think about what you wanted to do and how you wanted to build this match? Or did you see Shun's name and Korakuen and go, all right, here's what we're doing. Like, just trust me. Because he's been doing it for 30 years, and 25 of those years he's been doing it at a very high level. And when you think about reps and his built-in instinct and just his overall talent, I would just love to know now if wrestling is a challenge to him whatsoever.
And especially as someone who, it's not the case anymore, but basically up until COVID, wrestled more than anyone else in the world outside of maybe Atlantis making CMLL dates.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and hasn't been hurt in 24 years.
Yeah, hasn't been hurt in 24 years. The one time he got hurt, he had a kid. Like, maybe for Dragongate's future case, he should have got hurt maybe one or two more times.
Yeah, maybe would have been nice if they wrestled anything like Junior. But I think Junior is much like his father, 1 in a million.
Yeah, let's talk about. Oh, we didn't talk about Shun Skywalker.
I got a lot to say about Shun Skywalker.
Yeah. The modern day Nick Bockwinkel is, according to Case Lowe, Shun Skywalker.
Am I deranged in this opinion? Am I just fully off base? Even in my review, if you haven't read the review, it's at voicesofwrestling.com. I watched this match, and then I paused before the main event, and I went back and I watched Bockwinkel versus Rick Martel from September 20th, 1984. It's my favorite AWA match. It's one of the best matches in AWA history that we have on tape. And I watched this match. It jumped to mind immediately because Shun and Bockwinkel are the same guy. And I went back and read Boc's obituary because it's one of the best, Dave's best obituaries, and I recommend everybody go read it if they haven't. But the word that Dave kept on using in there was that Bockwinkel was this conductor, that it didn't matter who he was wrestling. It's not that they had to wrestle a Bockwinkel match, but you are never going to forget that Bockwinkel was in the match. And Shun is the same thing. He has a million different versions of matches. What he does with Mochi is different than what he does with Kame, which is different than what he does with Yo, which is different than what he does with Kakuta. But you never forget that Shun Skywalker is in a match. And as I pointed out when we talked about Gate of Origin a month and a half ago, the thing that I am most impressed with is that Shun can have a strike exchange with Punch Tamanaga and a strike exchange with Masaaki Mochizuki. And on separate nights, if he's wrestling Punch and then he's wrestling Mochi, it's not that one night he sinks down to Punch's level and the next night he races up to Mochizuki's level. He brings everybody up. He never loses credibility. He's never exposed. He never looks like a fool. He only exists within his character and the confines of that character, and that character raises all tides. And to do that, especially to a company like Dragongate, where the hierarchy is so clear and there are so clearly wrestlers beneath him that he is able to bring to his level, I think it is extraordinary. I think we are living in the presence of somebody who is great, who is absolutely terrific. And for as good as Mochi was in this match, to me, this was a Shun Skywalker match. I left going, I can't believe how good this guy is at wrestling.
Hey, what's up? It's Wilmer Valderrama. A lot of us don't think twice about our tech. Millions of Americans struggle to connect to today's digital world. And that's why this story really hits home for me. I mean, I start thinking about my upbringing and myself growing up in a world where, you needed every possible tool or help you could get to actually allow you and afford you a bigger dream. That's why I love what AT&T's been doing. They're doing something amazing. I mean, they've launched an effort to equip 20,000 students with laptops, backpacks, and school supplies. Seattle, for example, they provided 250 laptops and backpacks to kids who really needed them. Now, you might think like, okay, 250 kids, that's nice, but stop to think for a second, like the impact of what this could do for a community. Imagine, 250 kids getting that kind of help. It's huge. It's not just happening in Seattle, right? AT&T is doing it all over the country. I'm just proud that AT&T is helping connect the next generation to a brighter future, and that's pretty special.
Connecting changes everything. AT&T.
Yeah, and I left going like, oh, they really left a lot on the table between Shun and Mochizuki.
God, it's been 5 years since they had a singles match. Think about what Shun has done in those 5 years, and they avoided Mochi throughout the entire thing.
Yeah, and it's like to a degree where it maybe feels like a card up the sleeve that's like, hey, you know what? If we really ever need something, we could run a Shun Skywalker, Masaaki Mochizuki Dreamgate program, and that would be incredible. Like because they keep this match and this matchup very kind of special. But yeah, no, Shun Skywalker. There's no one with the exception. I used to say no one with the exception of Pac, who has more command of his character. No one with the exception of the Death Riders and John Moxley and Pac, who have a better awareness of who they are in pro wrestling. And every action and every match stays true to themselves. Like, even I have not watched this yet, but I've seen the clips of it. Shun Skywalker was doing Shun Skywalker things in the Taiji Shimori show. Like, he's the one person in wrestling who I think you teleport him into it, and just like, oh, if you put Shun Skywalker, if they sell him out for an appearance at a Sendai Girl show against Chihiro Hashimoto, we know it's going to be a Shun Skywalker match, and Shun Skywalker is going to be Shun Skywalker, and the match is going to be based around, all right, Hash is going to try to get this weirdo out of his game and suplex him to oblivion. But the thing is that he will still be Shun Skywalker, and there's really very few wrestlers in the entire world in the last 15 years who've been as committed and creating greatness and being committed, not necessarily being someone who has a sheer commitment to character, but their wrestling and character work is dog shit. No, Shun Skywalker from December 1st, 2021 to this date has been one of the most interesting and most complete heel wrestlers of his generation. And there's a reason why each time we go to a discussion about, oh, Shun, what is about this? We're like, but we don't want him to turn face anytime soon. We're witnessing someone's golden age happen in front of us to our eyes.
And that's the crazy thing is, especially in Dragongate, there's really not a ton of windows to be a dominant heel for it'll be 3 years in December. It'll have been a dominant heel for 3 years. And when you think about how finicky and how really sensitive the Dragongate audience can be, the thought of him being a dominant heel for 3 years, and I think collectively everybody we're not ready for this to end yet, is utterly incredible. That
was Shingo.
Exactly. Exactly. Because you and I are so pro Shingo Takagi. It's been said before, I'll say it again here. But Shingo turns heel. That's what a great example, Mike. He turns heel August of 2015. And even you and I, the biggest Shingo fans there were, what you get is you get August of 2015 to September 2017. And that's a 2-year period, 2 years and a month. But anything after that, Shingo is a heel, and it's overbearing. It's distracting. It's too much. It's too heavy. It doesn't fit the vibe of the promotion. And it was just like, what are you going to do? Nobody wants to see him as a face because nobody really wants to cheer him. But he's kind of killed everybody. Now we're going to have to feud him with Ryo Saito because there's just nobody left for him to feud with. And the last year of Shingo's Dragongate career is a pretty big bummer. Like, it's not fun watching 2018 Shingo because it's just this cloud that hangs over the promotion. And with Shun, it's just not that. It just feels right. It feels like this is who Shun should be for a very, very long time.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't think that with how Shun is working with like this, that there would ever be a situation where it's like, all right, we need to cycle up young guys. Shun needs to take a step back, and I guess he can feud with Ryo Saito, and then eventually we're going to need him to pinch hit in our biggest show of the year, and then he'll be out the door in 2 months. Like, 2018 Shingo and Dragongate is fucking bizarre.
It's really uncomfortable. So this actually ties in nicely to what we were talking about at the start of the show in terms of just content that we consume, the way we consume it. I've been thinking a lot recently. And like most things, it's twofold. I'm thinking about it in terms of music, and I'm thinking about it in terms of wrestling. And one of the constant talking points in the music industry right now is not that the album is dead. That's a gross oversimplification of things. People really like rollouts, and they like events, and they like feeling like they're a part of an event. But once the album comes out, you've got like 2 days of being the thing people are going to talk about, and then they are on to the next thing, right? Like, Billie Eilish's album this year has had a few different hits on it. It's a success. It's a nice rebound from her second album. But Billie Eilish's album was a thing for like 3 days, and then people moved on from it. And I started thinking about in wrestling about how I think we've hit a point where it's really hard to contextualize this modern era of wrestler, which I think is anybody from about 2018 onwards. It's really hard to contextualize these guys and how great some of their careers have been. And you factor it into like a greatest wrestler ever, or even a Flair Thez, just on a yearly scale for some of these guys. And it's really hard because we're always consuming something new. You're never caught up. If you're in this bubble, if you're listening to this show, you know this feeling. You're never caught up on everything. There's always something new that is going to be at your fingertips. I started thinking about how, Mike, maybe you're different. I don't know dates of matches anymore. And that feels like that was such a thing. 6/3/94, 6/9/95, 1/20/97, 3/1/03, 3/31/06 for Dragongate, 7/3/05 for Dragongate. That was a thing. AEW shows, I couldn't give you dates. I couldn't give you months on when these matches happened. I have no idea. In Dragongate even, it's become really tough for me to remember when things happen. I think part of that is we're no longer watching single match uploads. We're watching entire shows. It's never like, hey, I'm looking for this DDT match from July 30th. It's, I'm looking for yesterday's DDT show. And if you don't watch it within 3 or 4 days, it's old news. You're never going to get to it. It's that sort of thing. This is all to say, I started really thinking about how we can contextualize Shun Skywalker's greatness. And if you remember, Mike, in 2020, when Ishida and Okuda were having their feud, that was very good, even if their careers have certainly not gone great since. We were talking about how Ishida versus Okuda was the perfect compilation DVD feud, where if this was a different era, IVP videos would have Ishida versus Okuda for $8.99 on their website, and a bunch of people would buy it, and then a bunch of people would discuss it, and then we would remember it as this incredible feud that, was historically important. So I decided, and I'll post this. I don't know what to do with this, but I decided, I was like, I'm going to make a match listing for a Shun Skywalker comp DVD, and it's going to span his entire career. And okay, I'll do a disc in quote. I'll do a disc that's pre-excursion, and then I'll do a disc that's post-excursion. And then I started writing down. I went through my notes from 2016. I've watched his entire career in real time. I started going through my notes of his career, and I get to 30 matches of his career, 30 matches and 30 and angles that I deem essential pre-excursion. And I go, okay, well, that's a lot of matches. Let's do one for post-excursion. Let's see if we can fit all this in. And then I did his Masquerade run, and that alone was 30 matches of just stuff Volume that I would do. Exactly. Volume 2 is Masquerade. I haven't touched Z-Brats yet. There's 30 essential Masquerade things that I think everybody should watch. And then I go, okay, well, I got to do a Volume 3 now. We got to talk about Z-Brats. And I start going through all of the Z-Brat stuff over the last 2 years. And what I realized is that even now, as we sit here today, there's got to be 2 volumes of Z-Brat stuffs with all the 4-star matches he's had, but then also just all of the fun. Like, oh man, what a great TV style match. If you remember Skywalker versus Kato from last year and the other Kobe building, and then I think you might have gone Notebook on this. I remember I didn't, but Skywalker versus Kame from the
that ruled.
From the Genki Homecoming show last year was kind of like, hey, this is what Dragongate would look like if they were American TV wrestlers in the best possible way. So you start putting all of those matches in there, and I realized I had 30 matches from the beginning of Z-Brats to him losing the Dreamgate belt against Kakuta, and then I did another 30 from the May Korakuen show in 2023 to the May Korakuen show this year where he lost the Triangle Gate belts. So I haven't even touched the second half of 2024 for Shun Skywalker, and I realized we're talking about like a legitimate, like I'm not putting bullshit in these match listings. These are 4-star matches or really important historical angles or matches that like fucking rock. And there's 4 volumes of 30 matches. And that's not even touching the last 6 months of his career. Like, it's all happening too quickly for a guy like Shun Skywalker. Ospreay, I think, has escaped this because Ospreay's so overwhelmingly good and is so overwhelmingly good on a big stage that I think everybody gets it. Like, I think everybody gets, like, Will Ospreay is one of the best wrestlers of all time, unless you're a fucking idiot. But for a guy like Shun, and I think even for a guy like Miyahara, it's really, really tough to realize the catalog of matches these guys have because it's all happening so fast now. And I put all this together, and Mike, I think Shun Skywalker is one of the 100 greatest wrestlers of all time. He's fucking incredible.
And you know, just as like a little side rail to this, a lot of this is happening like at a time where you bring up people who have had similar, just like prodigious early starts to their career. Like think about like Kurt Angle, or even in a similar way. I mean, Kurt Angle, were actually Shun Skywalker's his 4-volume set actually might be now longer than his peak at this point. Like, I'm not going to talk about Perk Angle and all of that, but you have that.
Ooh, interesting discussion. We'll pencil that in for later.
But also, you could also like take someone like Jun Akiyama. You know, when we look at how consumption is, and I feel like that this is an aspect of this, that how things have changed throughout wrestling has been such like a stiff change. The fact that we see everything now immediately impacts things in a lot of ways. Whereas I know you're still going through early AAA What All mixtape, and you've said like, oh yeah, no, I'm at a point where like I know my guys and I know what's worth watching and what isn't. We didn't necessarily up until 2013, like the start of like the real streaming era. We didn't have the capability to watch all these things in real time, at least like these international wrestlers. So you look like a Jun Akiyama, and you look at like how at least like All Japan, like based like his time in All Japan with that, like when you're like looking at like the match listings and all of that, you're only watching the stuff that made Nippon TV, right? So we're also dealing with the fact that, you know, I mean, that's a weekly TV show. I don't remember like the exact time frame that you're talking about, but you maybe would be having one Akiyama match every 3 weeks, maybe on that TV show if you're getting the tapes and all of that.
Look, I you know, the TV listings, I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, I would think until like 95 or 96, yeah, you're maybe getting one Akiyama match a month.
You're getting one Akiyama match, and then you go like 96 through 99. I mean, when he was getting elevated, and you're still going from like one every 3 weeks to maybe 2 out of every 3 like this. That's not been the case for Shun Skywalker. And I think that changes things in that there will be like the counter argument of, oh, you didn't see all the other work. But also there's the idea that the fact that you do see all of Shun Skywalker's work, or people of this era who everything gets televised at this point, you're getting to a level of depth that you weren't able to hide behind that argument anymore. You know, like you can say like, well, you know, whenever they were doing the spot shows up in Gifu, All Japan, and like all of this, like that was not making tape, and like the guys were, you know, like they would put forth the effort, but you know, like that's the real thing. And it also goes back to Dragongate in its weird way. Like, remember for like the longest time, the belief was, oh, they don't go all out on house shows. Like they take it off at that point. And it's become very clear now since then, no, they don't take it off. And I think that that's an aspect about Shun Skywalker that contextually aids his case in a way that, is it fair to the people who wrestled in a different age that I'm someone that I would take the depth of that 4-volume series, you know, I mean, that's 120 matches over someone like, and I know this is a punching bag for me sometimes, I'm not going to go that way, the 52 matches of Volcom, you know, like
well,
go
ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say there's a level of depth that just does not exist, that did not exist up until a certain point.
This is really interesting because when you listen to people debate Jumbo versus Flair and who's the best wrestler of all time, one of the knocks on Jumbo and one of the knocks on Misawa is those guys did not try hard on house shows, which is an insane thing to say because those were shows that were not meant to be televised, aired in any way, shape, or form. But we have the handhelds, we have the bootlegs of them, and one of the knocks is that they did not work hard on those shows. Whereas Flair, we have handheld footage of him, and he would work his ass off on those shows. You know, he'd bleed, he'd do all these things. He would have the Flair match, even on a house show. The perception that we had of Dragongate house shows from wrestlers that we've talked to, from fans that we've talked to, prior to January of 2022, which is when the YouTube upload started, was these guys aren't working hard. They save everything for Kobe, Osaka, Tokyo. You know, they are doing these shows, yes, but they are not as taxing as you might think. You know, they're not doing Korakuen Hall in a random hotel conference hall in Gifu. And then we saw 2.5 years of Dragongate house shows, and it only helped the reputation of this roster. This is something FSM 52 years ago, there were some people on the panel not very happy about how many Dragongate guys were finishing in the top 50, and that's their prerogative, I get it. But one of the arguments that I made was, you guys, we're getting everything now. We're getting every show in almost every match that matters at the very least. And these guys are killing themselves, again, in insert hotel conference center here. It's amazing what they're doing. And Shun has been one of those guys. Shun, the only time that he takes a show off is on the U.S. Indies. And it's unfortunate that I think that has clouded some people's perception of him. But as somebody that just went back and watched some of his stuff in Mexico in 2020, and then you think about what he's done in the U.S. Indies, it's obvious, and I've been trying to tell people this, Dragongate, yes, wants to break into the U.S. Indie scene again. Dragongate also does not respect the current U.S. Indie scene. And there is no greater example of that when you watch Shun Skywalker on a GCW show and then Shun Skywalker on an IWRG show. The difference in effort is startling. That is really the only time that he dogs it now.
Yeah, and I can't say I necessarily blame him in that regard.
No. Now, the other thing I want to bring up, I know we're spending a lot of time on Shun, but I want to have this discussion, and it relates to the comp DVD to some degree. But we're sitting here November of 2024. So 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. We're a good chunk into this decade now. We have a sample size. And I started thinking, who is the best Japanese wrestler of the 2020s? And I have the asterisk here because his body of work happened in Japan prior to this year, but he's British. Will Ospreay's not in this conversation, because if Ospreay was in the conversation, he's the winner. The New Japan stuff he's done, absolutely mind-blowing. But as we sit here in 2024, who is the guy that has represented Japan best? And I have some names here. Let me throw the names at you, and you tell me if I'm missing anybody from this list, and then we can sort of debate it. So I would have, believe it or not, Mike, I would have Shun Skywalker as one of the names that should be mentioned. I would also have Shingo Takagi. I would have Kaito Kiyomiya. I would have Kento Miyahara. And I would assume that some people would put Hiromu Takahashi on this list, very high on this list. I would assume that some people would have Kano very high on this list. I would assume that some people would have El Lindaman very high on this list. You throw Joshi names at me if you want. I don't follow Joshi. I don't know how to do it there. Yeah. But who are the names that I'm missing from that list?
I think by and large, Mayu Iwatani has been someone that, even though she has not always been like in that picture, she has, for the 2020s has been that kind of star. Utami Hayase Shida, even though I feel like there has been like lulls with this, and by and large, Marigold is something that is just depressingly hard to get into.
He's a Hall of Famer, though, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would say Siri, and I think that she would play into that. I cannot attest too much about like the ice ribbon side of it, but I would say Tsukasa Fujimoto would be someone in consideration with that. But I think by and large, the one person that I would have to say that has like such a knock on your list is, do you think that Kiyomiya post Muto has done enough work to make up for the 2.5 years that he was stuck in the Muto vortex?
Well, let me frame it to you this way. I'm now determined and convinced. Determine's the wrong word. I'm now convinced Shun Skywalker is the best Japanese wrestler of the 2020s. And even though Shun misses most of 2020, I do think it's worth noting that he comes back in the middle of November. And from the middle of November to December, he had 3 matches at 4 stars or higher that I ranked, plus the Ben K match, which was very much on its way there before he knocked out Ben K. So even with Shun missing an entire year, I think his catalog of matches destroys Kiyomiya's. Now, Kiyomiya is, probably a top 5 guy in this conversation. At worst, given the state of Japanese wrestling, which is a backhanded compliment if there ever was one, Kiyomiya is a top 10 guy. But head-to-head against Shun, I think Shun smokes him.
Yeah, I would think that. Kento Miyahara, I would put probably as up there for that. I mean, the one person that I think we might be leaving out
Yeah, who are we missing? Who are the male wrestlers that we're missing?
Takeshita.
Okay, Takeshita's an interesting one. I thought about that.
Yeah.
Would he make my top 10? 100% yes. Does he make my top 10 primarily based on what he's done in America? Absolutely. When he's in DDT, he's the highlight of DDT, but his rep is an AEW rep. I consider him to be an American wrestler in the same way that I almost consider Will Ospreay, when we're talking about this specific conversation, to be a New Japan wrestler.
Yeah, but I would say that those who are more DDT inclined would probably have a list of those matches. I'm personally am someone that it took a long time for me to think that he had like the charisma that hit for me, and some of that is USA, but I mean it was starting to come together. I felt like right as AEW kind of came on the picture for him in that regard. But I would say that he would be someone that you would put on that list. And then when you look at the indies, that would be a difficult thing as well, because I know that there will be people that I mean, Daisuke Sakamoto at a certain point, but you could say 2020 was really like his decline was so high. Maybe Yuji Okabayashi at that point.
I mean, but Okabayashi hasn't wrestled in 2 years. I mean, Okabayashi doesn't have even.
But that's still 3 years.
So from the indies, the names that I would throw out there would be Abe and Nomura, and
Abe I was going to bring up, yeah.
I say this not as a compliment, not as an insult, just the reality of it. The Abe people are a lot like the Dragongate people, where they have a certain feeling about that style and about that specific wrestler that is superior to everything else out there. So if your answer to this is Abe because you're just an in the trenches, big Japan, shoot style produce guy, I get it. Now, for me, I like Abe. I don't really have him in this conversation, but again, that's a stylistic thing. I can certainly buy the argument that if you're so into that thing, that Abe is the best Japanese wrestler of the 2020s, whereas with Kiyomiya, I can't even buy that he's the number one, because it's not a stylistic thing. Kiyomiya has just been downright bad during entire portions of this decade.
No, and I think that is kind of a thing that hurts with this. Someone also, Miyu Yamashita, I feel like would be on that list as well.
So the way that I see it, and again, this is not including Joshi on my specific list, is it comes down to Shun, Shingo, and Miyahara. I raise my hand and wave the white flag that I'm always just a little bit lower on Miyahara than other people are. But I recognize Miyahara as an amazing wrestler, as somebody that is repeatedly at worst a top 50 wrestler, but somebody that is realistically a top 15, top 25 wrestler every year. I would push back on the Miyahara people and just point out that All Japan was really stale in 2020 and 2021, and I think even part of 2022, and that Miyahara, like my recollection of it is, he was having the default, like, this is a 4-star Kaito Kiyomiya Triple Crown defense match, but he wasn't doing anything that was extraordinary. It wasn't until All Japan found a groove, and then he had, the Nakajima matches, which are a huge feather in his cap. Nakajima's somebody that even though he's, reached the ultimate level of being a fucking geek, Nakajima's somebody that, deserves a mention in this conversation. Same with Go Shiozaki, he just can't stay healthy. But I think if you were to stack up important singles matches, important tag team matches, and just overall, if you want to rate it as almost like a good vibes match, I feel pretty strongly that Shun has Miyahara beat. I think the real competition is Shingo and Shun, and Shun misses most of 2020. Shingo, because of his push, he might as well have just missed all of 2022. They give him this super push in 2020, and then he puts the company on his back in 2021, and his thank you is that he has completely de-emphasized in the booking over the next year. And now it feels like when Shingo has a great match or when he gets the Never belt, it's like in spite of the company. I don't understand why they use him the way that they use him. But nevertheless, you talk about comp DVDs, in a different era, there's a Shingo versus Okada comp DVD, and there's a Shingo versus Tanahashi comp DVD, and there's a Shingo versus Ospreay comp DVD. And I'm on record for Shingo Okada and Shingo Ospreay. I think those are two of the best in-ring feuds that I have ever seen. And because they not only happen in the mass content era, they happen during COVID, they get no respect, and they will never get respect. But Shingo deserves a ton of pull in this conversation for those matches and for what he's continued to do in spite of what I think has been bad booking in 2023 and 2024. The difference is I give the edge to Shun, and I'm going to be really curious. I'm going to put this conversation in the Miscellaneous Puro channel on the Voices of Wrestling Discord, and I'm going to put it in the Puro channel on the Voices of Wrestling Slack. I'm really curious to see if we're forgetting any obvious names. I'm really curious to see who people think it is, because in November of 2024, when you just look at the totality of greatness and the consistency of Shun Skywalker, I think he is the best Japanese wrestler of the 2020s so far.
Yeah, I find myself coming to that conclusion. It is wild, the New Japan. We will book you to the top only in buildings we expect you to sell out. But wait, we've now booked you to the top so many times and not have, and like Osaka and Kobe are like, yeah, no, we love Shingo. We've loved Shingo for 20 years at this point. But like, unless you're giving us the big belt, we're kind of done seeing these matches with him.
It is a testament when we pivot to the other legacy conversation of GWE 100, that Shingo is 20 years into his career, and we're talking about him as perhaps the best wrestler in his country of the decade. And I'm struggling to think of anybody outside of maybe Mochizuki in 2014, that 2011 to 2015 Mochizuki run, that just, I can't imagine that applying to anybody else.
Yeah, no, Shingo's going to be an interesting case when he's done and retired, just for like the fact that he might end up being an Observer Hall of Famer by the end of like this next week, but who's to say like if ever he's going to get like the true kind of recognition for what he's been able to do in like multiple companies at this point, like at least 4.
I think the Shingo Hall of Fame thing is very funny, because I would bet that a large number of the Shingo voting base, and I do think he'll get in this year, it's not like people respect Dragongate all of a sudden.
No, it's not. It's solely from 2018 to 2024. Yes, you're absolutely right.
They're voting because Shingo's been that good in New Japan for 6 years, which is insane to think about, but it's deserved.
And on top of that case, they're like, hey, he was great in those 6 years. And wait, when he did that Ring of Honor excursion, he was the guy for Dragongate in USA for about 5 years.
He had that match against Morishima that I liked, and then I didn't watch him wrestle for 11 years, and then it turns out he's actually a pretty good wrestler. Like, I think that's what his Hall of Fame case is leaning on. 2021 greatest wrestler ever: Kobashi, Tenryu, Hansen, Fujinami, Takagi. If I ever create another list, I don't know if I ever will or not, Takagi's not going lower than 5. You know what I mean? Like, he's in that ballpark, and he's if not the greatest wrestler ever, then man is he close.
It's wild. It's wild, just the path he led. Well, do we want to talk about Mochizuki Jr. and ISHIN, the best match of the night?
Yeah, because there's the 8-man tag that preceded that was the All-Star King of Gate match. I thought Hyo looked awesome. Vibes. Yeah, I thought Hyo looked really good, and it's important for Hyo's sake to look really good right now. He can't suffer any sort of noticeable blemish in the ring. He has to keep on killing it, and he did. But I'm here to talk about Mochizuki Jr. and ISHIN.
My fucking God, these two guys just it's special to see that this rivalry continue to this point, and especially in a company that has relied so much on generational rivalries. This one is just really, it's really set itself apart as kind of the generational rivalry of this era, I feel like, just because of when you look at other classes and how things are going. Class of 2016 feels like they're never going to have like that rival in the class, but instead you have ISHIN and Mochizuki, like not only kind of being like generational heirs, but also being the second generation wrestlers. Time limit draw, just absolute great fighting. I would argue this is Junior's best match he's had without breaking his nose. so far.
Yeah,
He was bleeding, but it wasn't from his nose, and I was waiting for him
elbow.
to start. Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
That's probably true. That is probably true. Let me start with this. Let's have the dorky star rating conversation, because I love this match and I feel like I'm the low man on it. What did you give it?
4.5.
Okay, I went 4.25, and I feel like I'm low. I feel like most people are at 4.5, and I thought this match was awesome. So I don't know what to do with that. I promise I loved it. I thought it was great. I will also quickly note a really good Dragongate follow. I hope they're okay with me shouting out their Twitter account at Amy Hay, AMYHAY, and then it looks like maybe 2 underscores at the end there. Amy's a really good follow, and they had the chronological shot of ISHIN in all 3 of his singles matches against Junior, in the way that his body has changed in those 3 years. I retweeted it. If you haven't seen it, you need to look at it. It's unfathomable to think that the guy from 2022 is the same guy in 2024, and that not only is it the body change is shocking, but the fact that in 2024 we're like, yes, that is the body we want. It's not a sign of him being lazy and out of shape and unmotivated. It is good that he is this gigantic now.
No, that's how he gets his power.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, he used to be a baby bull, and now he's a full-born longhorn. That just kind of happens sometimes. I mean, I also think that with him, like, if you go back like through the series of matches, it was a lot of playing up on Junior for the first 2. This one was Ishin's masterclass. This one was an Ishin match, and you kind of get the idea of how Ishin, and we got a little bit of it with Yamato in the Dreamgate challenge a couple months ago, but the idea of Ishin as a top heel, you kind of got to see that with like his generational rival. And after the first 2 matches kind of being the style of matches that they were, kind of more scrap or die kind of things, seeing this like huge shift in a match like this is just incredible. And it's one of those things that, as Mochizuki Jr. is always going to be in the catbird seat as it relates to his career and how he is just being Masaaki Mochizuki's son and how they market it. That's something that matters. The fact that Ishin is able to kind of come into his own at this level, I think, is really phenomenal. It's the best match of Ishin's career, considering how strong of a match he had with Yamato a few months ago.
I mean, think about if this is your first Dragongate show. Let's say you get dragged to this, or you're, maybe even a lapsed fan that, King of Gate comes around, Korakuen Hall, all right, I'll buy a ticket, whatever. I don't know how you couldn't watch this match and immediately say, I'm a Mochizuki Jr. guy going forward, or I'm an Ishin guy going forward, but I'm following one of these 2 guys to the death. That is the sort of statement match that I thought it was, where Junior is just, he's such a good underdog babyface in this way that it's like, it's different than Generico, and it's different than Ibushi or Ricky Morton. You think about the great underdogs in history. It's this different thing. He has this different energy to it where he gets the shit kicked out of him in every match, but he still comes across as tough and as credible. And then you have Ishin, who, I mean, he's doing his Dictogo Michinoku Pro impression, and that is one of the highest compliments I can give somebody. I'm ready to follow both of these guys into the death. This is absolutely, I think it's a very cursed thing to say, a generational rivalry in Dragongate, because it seems like we've been set up for a few of those, and some people really like doing drugs in Mexico, and some people just get hurt, and either way, these generational matchups are off the table. But they've had 3 singles matches in 3 years. They're 1-1-1. Barring any sort of catastrophe, I think we are going to live in the world of Mochizuki Jr. versus Ishin for a very long time. And then they'll team together, and then they'll team with Strong Machine J, and then they'll all break up, and it'll keep going. And Dragongate is handing you on a platter stories for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years. Take advantage of it now. Watch this match.
And it's going to be such a great thing to see them kind of weave in and out this rivalry. I think something that's kind of cool that newer fans might not realize is just the fact that both of those are Tokyo kids in different manners. Like, Ishin, like when his dad was around and Ricky was around, it was such a big deal that like they would have like an Ihashi section that was happening, and you have the fact that the Mochizukis have always treated Korakuen Hall as home base for them, and I think that's going to be a beautiful thing to kind of watch evolve over their careers, is not just how the rivalry is, but how the rivalry is in this building. I think that will be a fun thing to track.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, we talked about this in 2022 where they were deliberately putting all of the Junior and Ishin in, you know, Mochi and Mochi Jr. and Ishin and Ricky matches. They had a whole feud that was Tokyo based. Now the blow off, you know, ended up being in Osaka, but this is something that we talked about this in 2022. This really mattered to that Korakuen Hall crowd. That was a local / regional feud that was built around being in this building, and it was really important to those fans in 2022, and it's remained important ever since. You know, they wrestled at Dangerous Gate last year, which was in Tokyo last year, and it's again in Korakuen. It's a great point. This is one of those things. This is a Tokyo feud in a way that I can't think of anything else in Japan outside of, you know, beating Dragon Kid in this hometown. I can't think of anything that is this hyper specific to one location right now.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of those things that's going to make it so cool to see as their career goes on. Before this was the Flamita versus Dragon Kid match that we talked about up top. We had a 6-man tag, 8-man, Hamare, Jason Lee, Kai Kataminora defeating Akihiro Sahara, Genki Horiguchi, Kagatora, and Ultimo Dragon. We got Sahara in Korakuen Hall, and boy, is he a fun guy to watch.
He really is. I like this spot he's doing with all the shoulder blocks. He did it against Shimizu and he did it against Kai here, where, you know, he tries to hit a million of them and his opponent goes nowhere. And then I forget what led to it. I think maybe Shimizu missed a splash in the corner and Sahara bounced off the ropes and a big shoulder block and knocked him down. And this time, Genki Horiguchi finally hit Kai with a tornado DDT. And then Sahara ran across the ring super fast and hit this big shoulder block and knocked him down. And it's a classic young boy style wrestling spot, but Sahara does it exceptionally well.
Yeah, not to get back into diet talk, but we are seeing with Ishin, with Sahara, when Kato comes back, this new generation of Dragon Gate wrestler, and you can even extend it back, like Strong Machine J is never going to be a brave guy. You have a lot of these roster members that are now just fully like full-blown like traditional heavyweights, if not very close to that. Maybe it's like in this generation that you get to see like some real fun heavyweight style wrestling, and getting Sahara, they had him up against Shimizu, then they have him up against Kai. I'm excited about seeing Sahara versus Ishin at this, and maybe we are seeing a time where with now Dragon Dia where he's at and the roster getting a little bit larger, maybe the elevation of Bravegate might actually happen a little bit.
It's a really interesting point. You know, if you're New Japan or if you're Noah, All Japan's got a good enough young system right now. But if you're New Japan or you're Noah, you got to look at some of these kids in the Dragon Gate dojo and go, fuck, oh my God, we missed up. I mean, Kato, there was the photo that came out this week of Kato at the Noah tryout, which of course Noah would pass on him, you know,
yeah,
just a guy tailor-made for pro wrestling. No, who needs him, you know? But that's a really good point. That the Dragon Gate guys are really big right now, and I would assume a guy like Junior, who's still sickeningly young, you know, he'll fill out. He won't be super tall, but he'll thicken up a little bit. That's a very interesting point. There's some big guys here, and that while I might love my junior heavyweights, and I you know, would love to build a promotion around Matt Seidel and the former Zima Ion, I understand I'm in the minority there, and the people want their heavyweights. And for Dragon Gate, that's a very interesting point. They have a very interesting 5-year plan ahead of them if half of these guys pan out.
Yeah, and then maybe with that, you're going to have to do more stuff around the Brave Gate for the guys who aren't going to be super big too. So like, there's a lot to go with that. Speaking of young guys, and one that is not a heavyweight, he sure teamed with a couple of super heavyweights here. Punch Hamanaga and Shuji Kondo defeated Daiki Yanagiuchi and Toru Owashi. Daiki has lost yet again, but boy, this match, the sequence with him and Shuji Kondo, I don't know how much more Kondo is really going to be featured within the company as years go by, but I would, if I'm allowed to do my mind's eye booking of a future King of Gate, I want Kondo versus the Gooch.
I will say
he has it on his tights. Gooch is on his tights. Yeah, he's the Gooch. If he didn't have Gooch on his tights, I wouldn't call him the Gooch. Okay.
The spot where Kondo went for the Lanzarse, which is his running spear, and Yanaguchi countered it into that weird flash pin schoolboy kind of thing he does. That is the coolest Yanaguchi spot that he's ever done. I want him to win matches, but now I kind of want to see him lose in super cool ways, and that was really, really cool.
Yeah, and then he died.
And then he did, in fact, he did King Kong Lariat, and that was a tough one.
And we opened with the Korakuen Hall debut of one Home Economics Dragon as he got the win yet again. He's 2-0 now. Maybe he can go for the Brave Gate. He teamed with UT and making his main show debut, but it looks like this is his only appearance for now. El Pantera Jr., they defeat the unaffiliated team Jackie Kamei, Rita, and Ryoya Tanaka. Did not know until watching the show that Ryoya Tanaka's nickname, Top Gun. Top
My
Gun
man.
Ryoya Tanaka.
My man.
I like it.
Did you watch... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Did you watch Pantera Jr. in the Michinoku Pro Mask League?
No, that was happening around my wedding, so that did not get watched.
All right, fine. I guess you had to get married instead of watch modern day Michinoku Pro.
It's an era of consumption now, and I should I go back to watch the Michinoku Fukumen Mask League right now?
You should watch the finals, which was
okay.
El Pantera Jr. and then Amakusa from Noah in a different gimmick. Pantera Jr. is doing that thing right now, and we need to ask Jay next time he's on. This new economy of guys coming over to Japan and just working a bunch of different promotions. Like D-Moose just did this, and now Pantera was working Michinoku Pro, now he's working Big Japan. He did the Dragongate shot. I don't know the economics behind that. I'm really intrigued because that seems like a newer thing. If they wanted him and Pantera wanted to do it, if he wrestled in Dragongate for 6 months, he would be really, really good. Because it is very clear that he needs to wrestle better wrestlers. Because the Michinoku Pro match had a lot of potential. It kind of fell apart in the middle. It just hit a lull that it was hard to recover from. But I really, really liked him in this opener, and I really want to see more of him in Dragongate.
Yeah, he looked impressive. He had it was like a nice little change to have someone like that who wrestles that style of lucha versus the lucha rest style that we like see, and how well he just like fits in with it. Like I thought it was really, really neat to see with him if that Home Economics Dragon 2-0. I mean, he's got to get himself into title contention. Jay brought up that he might be the one person to break Mochizuki Jr.'s quickest champion streak there. What were your thoughts on Kamei on this show? Because we got to see Hyo and Monte look really good in that all-star match where Kamei was stuck with the rookies and his juniors in this opener. It just kind of, for me, it feels so stark where he's at right now, booking-wise.
Well, I certainly loved the combination of guys he was teaming with, because we haven't seen him with Rita and Tanaka before, and that's kind of one that you got to stow away and go, okay, next time there's a big shakeup, next time multiple guys are looking for new units, they're all three very small, which works against all of them being in the same unit, but also I'd like to see all of them in the same unit. But, look, it's in the second half of 2024, if there's a match with Rita or a match with Tanaka in it, my eyeballs are going to them. And unfortunately, that includes a matches with Kame, and he was the third most interesting guy on his team in this match.
Yeah, and he's wearing the fucking overalls.
Wearing their overalls. That is it's a very un-Dragongate like mistake there. Just put him in the cowboy pants and the cowhide pants and call today, and we'll get him New Year soon, and it'll all be okay, because I'm pretty sure he's turning heel and going to be wearing mascara. But yeah, major mistake there with the overalls. That was kind of, he came out and it's just like, ugh, not this again.
Yeah, and it was like to the Jackie Funky Baby fame, and maybe he needs that heel turn really bad.
Maybe
Like,
he just goes back to vibes. Maybe he just acts like the last 6 months didn't happen.
He just shows up and goes pow, 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 and Strong Machine Jay is going like, what are you doing here? You're not part of my vibes anymore.
Yeah, they do the Freebirds rule. You know, Flamita's going to go back to Mexico, and he's like, Casey, brother, I got you. We'll defend the Twin Gate belts. And then he just has all these awesome Twin Gate matches. Like, why can't that happen? They just put it back in vibes.
And, you know, like, with the way that the team names go, Funky Time. Perfect.
Put it on the board, baby.
Put it on the board, Funky Time. He's not having a funky time right now. And that was Korakuen. That was their one of their few network stops of the tour. They will be back on the network towards the end of this month. Hokkaido Triple Shot starts on the 29th. They will be running King of Gate all through that case. I'm going to go through the blocks real quick, if you don't mind. So on A block, the situation is that Dragon Kid has forfeited his matches against Luis Monte and Junior, and he still has 2 matches outstanding. Don't count on them happening. He'll probably go out with 0. But that has everyone else at this point. You have Luis Monte standing at 2. He has not had an official match. Junior is at 3 right now. He's the technical block leader with his tie. They have not counted the Minoura or Ishin wins yet, but they will have those as well. You're really going to have to look towards the Kota Minoura match that he will have. Now none of Minoura's matches are going to get televised. That's another thing about that, about DK being out. He was going to go up against DK and Sapporo. Probably not going to happen. The match that's going to probably figure out this block now will be Luis Monte versus Ishin on the 30th in Sapporo. Moving on to the B block, it is Masaaki Mochizuki's tournament so far. He's at 5 points, Case. He's at 5. And after that, you have Shun at 2. He beats Susumu on a house show. And then KZ is at 1. He had a time limit draw with Mochizuki. Mochizuki's last 2 matches are in Sapporo. So he will play into the block. His 2 last matches are against Hyo and Susumu Yokosuka. So keep an eye on that. And then in C block right now, you have both Dragon Dia and Benkei at 2. Yamato and Strong Machine J are tied at 1 point. Big Boss Shimizu has 0. Jason Lee has not had a match yet. Your eye goes to the match on the 29th, Jason Lee versus Yamato and Hokkaido, as well as Benkei versus Dragon Dia in Hokkaido as well. So those will probably be like the ones that kind of figure out who will be into the last chance tournament, as well as the semifinals and finals in Korakuen Hall.
I feel pretty strongly that Benkei is going to eat a Reptilian Rana on that show, and that Dragon Dial will be moving on.
Yeah, but that's what we have going on for Dragon Gate for the remainder of the month. They have Genki Horiguchi's homecoming show. Actually, they will be on the network once more. It'll be a Prime Zone Plus on the 15th.
Oh, so, good. A show with no King of Gate match is awesome.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. But that is the Dragon Gate lineup for the remainder of the month. Case, I have a topic. Do you think we have time to get into this now?
I don't think so.
We'll save it for next week.
Well, let's do an on-air production meeting real quick. Mike, go to your Slack chat. Go to the pinned messages. Are we due for a rewind and rewatch next week for the much anticipated November episode?
Yes, we are.
Because there's nothing on the network, right? Other than Prime Zone.
Nothing on network other than Prime Zone. We should do that one. Yeah, absolutely. Especially this one coming up.
Yep. All right. Well, then next week, classic content, rewind and rewatch. It's a big one. It's coming your way. In the meantime, I'll let Mike sign off, but I will post my hypothetical Shun Skywalker compilation DVD match listing. I'll post that in the Discord, and I'll post that on my Twitter, not my Blue Sky, but my Twitter. Maybe it generates conversation, maybe it doesn't. But the good news is, outside of there's like 3 matches from 2016, and I don't have anything from 2017. But other than the 2016 matches, everything is on the network. You should be able to go back and watch most things. I guess this ties in full circle to the conversation we had at the start. You should be able to watch most things on the network. And there's a really fun Shun Watanabe versus Yamato match from a Prime Zone episode that made the compilation listing because a rookie Shun Watanabe busted Yamato's mouth open, and I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that I remember that specifically. I do have one last thing I want to throw at you, Case.
Oh, please.
I have my new worst match of the year.
Give me what region it happened in.
Oh, it happened in Osaka.
Oh, okay. You're watching the Glate show now, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Is it on that Glate show?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let me pull up this card. I've got it right here. This is the...
I'm right now on the main event right now. There was some actually okay stuff on the show, but there's one thing that is the most depressing thing I've seen all year.
Okay, so this is the November 10th, 2024 Glate show. Here's the thing. I'm looking at this card now, and it sucks what you're about to say because everybody's been shitting on this, and I was fully prepared to zag and say, this is actually kind of fun, but I know what you're going to say, and it's going to hurt my feelings, and you can go ahead and say that match number 4 was the worst match you saw this year.
Parker Boudreaux like drops Shima, and Shima like tries to like save it, but you can tell he's really fucking pissed throughout it. It's
that sucks.
Parker Boudreaux is very funny as a presence, but it's really sad at this point. Like, I know that he seems like he's on the upswing with the Hall of Fame. I'm happy for that, but I actively, like, it was depressing for me to watch. Like, I don't think it's an outright dud, but it's half star, maybe.
I was really ready to zag on that entire thing, and I'm not going to be able to now, and that sucks.
Yeah, maybe it's just my distaste for what's happening in his career.
No. I think you're probably right.
Yeah, it's a weird show. G-Rise does very much look like that they are opening a spin-off of the Kiki Gems with that logo. But yeah.
Will you let me know if that main event's any good?
That just finished up. That was fun.
Okay,
The most I've liked JD Lee the entire time he's been in the promotion. He actually looked really good in that.
Okay, that tracks. Is the Rio Ataka guy? Is that one of Ibushi's kids?
He is, but he's a former K1 fighter.
Ow.
Like he's legit.
Never mind. I was like, I'm gonna watch that. I want to see one of Ibushi's kids. I'm good. Never mind.
Yeah. He's a former K1 fighter. He's married to one of the big names out of AKB48. Like, it's
Great.
one of those things.
All right.
Yeah.
What? Fuck. God damn it! I wish this promotion was good, and it's just so not.
And as soon as I looked into it, they were charging about 120,000 yen for front row for this show, or 12,000 yen for the front row seats instead of like 100.
214 fans.
214 fans. That's right. 214 fans to see Kaito Ishida to cut a show closing promo, and they're all just kind of going okay because the crowd's kind of more into So Diamonji at this point.
You know what's a funny Shima trope?
Oh, please tell.
The debuting unit losing their first match.
Oh yeah, and especially a babyface unit, they have to lose their first match.
Because I saw the match listing and I thought, God, this promotion can't do anything right. But then I realized that's just what he's like. Matt Blanky lost their first match, and they lost it to Taka Michinoku and Sanshiro Takagi. Like this is just what they do. Debuting units lose when Shima has a say in it.
Yeah, and this is like for like at one point like the strongest Black Generation International has looked in this promotion in a long time. And they have like
with Hartley Jackson, Kaito Ishida, Kotaro Suzuki, and So Dimanji. You're right. I guess that's the strongest lineup they've got.
I mean, Hartley Jackson, if we want to give an award for the mover and shaker in wrestling this year.
Love that guy.
Yeah. Jackson #1, Jackson getting to show up to Sumo Hall and celebrate with Zack Sabre Jr. Great work, man.
You know what I enjoy when I was putting together all these Shun Skywalker matches was, one, it's cool to see the difference in opponents that he's kind of killed it with, you know, where it's like at one point it's like, oh, look at all these Shun, Eita, and, you know, Ishida or Shun, Eita, Hyo 6-man, and then it transitions into something else. One of the things that I was reminded of is that for a few years there, Kazuma Sakamoto was an incredible pro wrestler, and he's just so not anymore.
Yeah, he's kind of collecting checks at this point.
He was like, if people started watching Dragongate, last year, and they've oh, Glate's the other thing. Okay, let me check that out. Sakamoto, one, has a 4 3/4 star Dreamgate challenge against Shun Skywalker, and was routinely awesome from 2018 when he came in until 2022 when he left, and has just sucked in Glate.
Yeah, remember how sick his matches were with Jason Lee?
Yes. Oh my God. I mean, with everybody, he had great chemistry with that entire roster.
Yeah. No. Oh, gosh, that's a shame.
One of my proudest victory laps is telling everybody to be patient on Sakamoto. They judged him because he came in as an X, and everybody thought it was going to be Pac, and it was Kazuma Sakamoto, which in 2018 Dragongate there was no goodwill there, so that really stung a lot of people. But I said, hold on, everybody. Sakamoto looks like he can hang on this roster, and then he hung for a very long time, and boy, is he just not who he used to be now.
Yeah, what a bummer. But Case, I think that's going to do it for us this week, unless I find something else about Glate that bothers me in the next 10 seconds.
I'm out of things to say, so I hope you don't find anything about Glate that bothers you.
I may not, other than its general existence, but That's going to do it this week on Open the Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week with one of the more fun historical shows that we'll ever do. It is something that, as soon as I looked it up, Case, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And so get ready for that next week. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate if you want to hang out with us. We are in the Voices of Wrestling Discord. You can find us both in the Open the Voice Gate channel. That's where I know Case is probably going to post a lot of Shun Skywalker matches and links coming up, as well as the Dragongate channel, where there's a lot of always good discussion happening there. Case is at _in_your_case. I'm at Fuji Heya. Thanks for listening to Open Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone.
Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragongate is, how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragongate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why, when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million+ products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.